Distinction bias, a cognitive trap. The main goal of this experiment was to investigate if distinction bias is prevalent in today's world when looking within a school environment. This frame of mind, known as distinction bias, a cognitive trap, is defined: a tendency of individuals to compare two similar things side by side, simultaneously, not putting too much emphasis on small differences that would make no real difference in a bigger setting. Distinction bias forces individuals to overanalyze the effect of small disparities when comparing options or when making decisions. To investigate the distinction bias concept, I conducted an experiment to research the prevalence of it by having participants of Singapore American School replicate an experiment that was conducted in a university in Southeast China. However, in my experiment, I conducted 30 trials, whereas the investigation in China involved 243 students. Therefore, the results I ended up with may not be the same standard and precision as the previous experiment. Students in Singapore American School were the participants in my experiment when I investigated the prevalence of distinction bias, as decisions were being made regarding two options that were quite similar. Creating a scenario using a varied amount of chocolates to examine whether the distinction bias concept can be seen in students of Singapore American School when formulating decisions. When two options are compared side by side, their difference becomes more apparent to the eye, despite the fact that initially they would have looked very similar. My prediction is that distinction bias is prevalent in today's society, causing individuals to make decisions that are not the most rational when looking at the future impacts these decisions can cause. Individuals are not able to make decisions effectively, causing them to be indecisive at times. A paper that portrays this similar idea is titled Distinction Bias: Misprediction and Mischoice Due to Joint Evaluation, written by Jiu Zhang and Christopher K. C. Christopher K. C. received his PhD from Yale and wrote with Jiu Zhang about the relevance of the distinction bias concept. People may overweight attributes that are easy to articulate and underweight other attributes that are important for experience when asked to analyze reasons during the choice phase. This portrays that distinction bias can magnify the meaningless differences between two very similar items to a time where they become decisive, allowing them to choose and finally make a decision. Replicating the experiment conducted by Jiu Zhang and Christopher K. C. in Singapore American School will show whether distinction bias is used by individuals studying here to determine a final decision when deciding between two very similar options. Now, what did I do? Well, when conducting my experiment, to see if it is possible to replicate the original study's results regarding distinction bias, I set up a scenario with 1 chocolate on one side of the table and 3 on the other. The individual who was participating in my experiment was alone, meaning there was no one there able to cloud his or her judgment. He or she was told that they need to make a decision regarding the actions they will need to perform following the payoffs they will gain or lose after the decision was made by the individual. The participant was told that if they picked to eat 1 chocolate, then as eating the chocolate they were required to write down any good memory that they made in their life or have. However, if they choose to eat 3 chocolates, then they will be writing down a personal failure or a not so positive moment that took place in their life when eating the 3 chocolates. After the decision was made, the student will then be given the amount of chocolates they chose and a piece of paper where they will write down the memory they would have chosen to recall while eating the chocolates. From this experiment, I observed that out of 30 trials, 16 made the decision of choosing to recall a negative memory when eating 3 chocolates, whereas 14 of the 30 individuals decided to recall a positive memory, but eating 1 chocolate. When looking at the results from my experiment regarding distinction bias, the decisions individuals made in Singapore American School when choosing between the two options were that out of 30 trials, more people opted for eating 3 chocolates consequently. It meant they had to recall a negative memory or moment that took place in their life. Looking at the experiment I conducted, the difference between the two options were only 2 decisions made by 2 individuals, as 53.3% out of 30 chose to eat 3 chocolates, and 46.7% chose to eat 1 chocolate, but no data positive memory. This shows that in my experiment, the number of individuals choosing either option were very close. I replicated the experiment that was previously conducted in a university situated in Southeast China by Christopher K.C. and Zhou Zhang. Their investigation considered 243 students of the university to see the prevalence of the distinction bias concept. I mirrored their experiment. However, I experimented the dominance of the distinction bias concept in students of Singapore American School, but conducting 30 trials. The sample of my experiment contained 30 participants, which I recognized as being a small population to make a high, accurate, and precise conclusion from. In addition, the experiment I was replicating included a higher number of students from Southeast China University, meaning their conclusion of their results would have a higher accuracy in comparison to mine. Seeing in the study done by Christopher K.C. and Zhou Zhang, the results of the experiment they conducted majorly differed from my overall results when looking at the decisions the students from the university made compared to the students from Singapore American School. The study's results that was conducted by Christopher K.C. and Zhou Zhang concluded with 2/3 of the 243 students that participated in this experiment eating 3 chocolates while writing down a negative memory. This was the overall result, as these participants were guaranteed 3 pieces of chocolate. When individuals were making these decisions, they thought that the greater the number of chocolates they were going to obtain, the greater their happiness would be, as the number of chocolates were larger when choosing this option than the other. The experiment I conducted proves that there were a number of individuals who noticed the number of chocolates being greater for an option than the other when deciding, but also there was almost an equal number of individuals who considered the fact that gaining a larger number of chocolates might benefit them at that specific time, making them happy, but remembering a negative memory or moment that took place in their life might not put them in the best place. From the experiment I conducted in Singapore American School, the concluding results prove that distinction bias is prevalent in our community. However, it can be said that it is not as prevalent as it is in the university located in Southeast China. This portrays the fact that students of Singapore American School do not always view 2 choices simultaneously. However, considering the sample size of my experiment, this statement is not accurately correct, as the amount of trials I had were too small to make a definite conclusion from. Although when regarding this experiment I conducted at a Singapore American School, the statement is correct when looking at the results that were drawn up for the 30 trials. There were external factors that could have also impacted the results of the experiment. For example, the participants that were involved could have possibly made their decisions after looking at the chocolates they would be eating. Some of the individuals might not like chocolate. Some might not prefer specific flavors of chocolate. These factors could have majorly influenced their decisions, causing them to choose to eat 1 chocolate and remembering a positive memory. My investigation shows a majority of individuals' decisions are being made by considering the quantity of an option, which is believed to hold a higher recognition regarding the individual, as the decision would have made them happy. I am agreeing with the information that has already been stated in the field regarding the distinction bias concept, as when decisions are being made, individuals would have believed that was the decision that would have benefited them, but it's not, as there are other factors that need to be considered to make the decision they make rational. This is the reason why people should not compare options side by side, as this is where they get into trouble and end up with decisions that would not make them happy in the long run. To overcome this path, each person should evaluate each choice individually and on its own.